welcome back to the next episode of Coaches and Coffee. Thank you again to the 30 plus listeners from last week. Either we got the same
30, it was 67 or something like that.
That's total, my friend. That's between the two episodes. So
that
yeah,
sucks.
we're not getting, it's not growing yet, but it's gonna take off. And, last week I finished the podcast and we forgot to thank your coffee company, Professor. You name dropped them in our podcast and we didn't even
give
thank
the
them.
actual name because we haven't gotten, full sponsorship yet.
But okay. All right.
I will say I am enjoying another cup of their coffee. This one's Fireside.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, as we dove deeply into team culture and winning culture last week, and after some deep thought from us this week, after like one or two text messages, we decided to continue on that team path, and we'll talk more about how to build a program and some of the challenges of building programs today and see where it takes us. So as we get started, I'll throw it to you, Professor. How is a way that you feel building a program in, I guess, our coaching time frame, not just today, but over the years, what was important to you in building a program?
I think the specifics of building a program. I mean, we talked last week about fundamentals, and Wizard had his pass, shoot, and dribble, and I threw in some defense. Those are obviously important, but I think as coaches, we need to focus on learning in order to build our program. And I know all of us in the old days, you could call up any coach and show up to their practices and watch their practices. Call up college coaches and go visit them. Read books. Nowadays, we watch 90-second reels on YouTube or Instagram, and we think we're a coach. And I think it's important to understand what we're teaching. I've seen a lot of really good drills run, but the coach running the drill doesn't know what they're trying to get out of the drill. And I think we need to spend a lot more time on very specific fundamentals and learning how to coach those. And the only way you do that is learning from the best. I mean, I've learned, this is going to sound ass-kissing again, but I've learned a lot from you guys watching your teams. And I think it's just the way you have to start your specific development of a program.
Wizard?
I think a lot of things at the younger ages, it's important to make it fun while they're learning, because a lot of times that's how you keep the younger kids involved. And through that, you always hear some people will say, well, they're not having fun. That's why they're not playing. Well, maybe as they're getting older, they're not having fun because they don't really like the game and they're not working on their game. And, that's the thing that you have to be careful about, is the line of when they're younger in your feeder programs, making it so that there's interested and keep them going. And part of that might be a little bit of winning here and there, but the main thing is keeping them interested as they're younger, and then hopefully they develop into a person who really loves the game. Let's face it, a lot of times we had kids who played because they wanted to be part of the team culture. They wanted to be with their friends. And sometimes it was just a way to get away from maybe academics as a whole. But, us, where we were at a smaller school, and a lot of times we had to play younger kids, it was important that those younger kids that came up and played, you don't wear them right out, absolutely despising not only hearing your voice, which I'm sure most of them probably did despise hearing my voice, but, keeping them involved. And one of the things as we got further along, and you had to kind of trick the kids into being involved in drills and competing where they weren't just straight out running, because they always looked at running as discipline. And, that was not the case. You were getting them ready for the next season in the bigger floors when you play in the shoebox. So that was one of the things that we tried to do, was trick the kids into getting their cardio in while they were competing in the drills.
Yeah, I think good points there, both. And Professor, the comment about watching a 90-second YouTube or Instagram and then think we're the next Phil Jackson probably is unrealistic. And I think when you said, you do drills at practice sometimes the kids don't understand. And I know one of these episodes we're going to go into the ideas of what a practice looks like. But it's amazing sometimes, putting in drills specific to a game plan, and you try to build off from it, and it literally takes, every step, say it's a 4-step progression drill to get to the end before they see it, and sometimes they still don't see what the point is. A couple things that I would say about building a program, and we touched on it in last week's episode about developing standards or values that are important to you and not wavering from those. And one of the things that I see, or I've seen over the years, is how coaches hold kids accountable. I've coached a little longer. You guys decided to jump off the boat before I did, probably because you have more sanity.
Smarter.
We'll go with smarter. Okay. But how kids, you see sometimes today, how they talk to a coach. I don't ever recall seeing a kid talk back to either one of you, in a game. Maybe they might have tried it in a practice. And I think one of the things that all the kids need to see is that you have the same accountability, whether you're the star player or you're the number 12 player on the team, that if your standards can't apply or don't apply to your better players, then you're not really establishing, a culture or a program. You're focused on winning. And I think we talked about it last week about winning, shouldn't be the focal point, doing all the things the right way, and growing these kids and building their confidence. That's another thing I think probably more so today than 20 years ago, is you sometimes have to be that confidence boost for them, and getting kids to believe in themselves. Every player has a role on a team, and if you can get them to buy in, no matter what that is, and sometimes kids are just practice players for that season because they're an underclassmen and they're not ready. But you get them to do that job to the best of their ability, and it makes everybody else better. So, those were just a couple of things, and I think we, are pretty good communicators as coaches, from what we saw or I saw over the years. Sometimes you have to be blunt, though. There's too much, fake supporters is what I would say, is like, oh, you did really well today, or no, let's just be honest with them. They didn't have a good game, and that's okay. Like, that's part of life. And not everybody's going to get a trophy in life, but in order to grow, you have to have constructive and honest communication. And I guess I'll throw it back to either one of you that want to jump on that, because I would say you guys are as old school, probably more old school than I was, but throw it back to you from the communication standpoint and being honest with kids.
I want to
Well,
let
I
Wizard
think
jump
one.
in a second, but I got one thing I got to clarify there, Wizard, for Mags. He keeps throwing us under the bus here, and he said something about the players number 1 versus player number like 11 or 12, and I think he forgets that you and I don't coach at a D2 school where we have 12 kids in the whole program. I think it's just
Right.
a little thing, but go ahead, Wizard.
Well, I think one of the main things out of that point is, a kid gets done a game, and if they played well, they know they played well. If they stunk the joint out, they knew they did. And I think the biggest thing is bullshitting them and saying, well, you tried. Those days, especially at the varsity level and above that, the kids, they don't want to just try. They want to play, they want to be successful, and they want to excel. So keeping BS behind you, especially when you're talking to kids at the high school level, is probably a better way to move forward. Let mom and dad take care of the keeping them motivated, I guess, as regards to feeling good about themselves. They know, and you don't have to browbeat a kid after a game that they didn't play well because they know it. You just learn from your mistakes and move forward.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, I had a kid that played and didn't realize as she steps up to her graduation speech and she gets up there and she goes, the thing I learned, I think, in high school that probably the most important was my coach used to say to us every day as practice would start, well, let's suck a little less today. And I kind of went, oh, no. We got through the graduation speech, but it really is what it's about. Suck a little less each day, and you don't have to tell them they're doing a great job. It's suck a little bit less. Remember one of my players coming off the floor after she had made a layup, and she says, oh, how'd I do out there, coach? I said, that was adequate. And I got that look. So, yeah, suck a little less.
One of my favorite coaching moments with the Wizard was, he had a kid in the game, and I couldn't remember who the kid was today, and I wouldn't name drop him anyways, but they had, I think, 2 fouls in the first half or 3 in the first half, and it was early in the third quarter, and the kid picked up a silly foul. One of our players drove baseline and didn't move her feet, didn't get in front of the ball. And as the kid comes off, I remember the Wizard saying, hey, that's how you move your feet, as sarcastic as he can be, sitting down, never stood up and said that. And I remember the coaching staff with me, we just chuckled about, the honesty of, like, you had just put her back in or whatever it was and said you can't pick up your neck, whatever number foul it was, and it was literally 1 or 2 possessions later, and that's the way to move your feet.
I remember the exact situation.
Okay, see, I mean, sometimes we don't forget these things.
She was one of those players that I think about her a lot now, and she's actually a nurse now.
Oh, you better hope you don't go to that hospital.
No, she's great.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, she's great.
That's how you do an IV. Thanks.
Right in the neck.
Yeah, I've always said, sometimes, or I hope it doesn't ever come back to haunt me, these kids, like, being direct and being honest, that, I do walk into an emergency room for something someday, and they're the ones that have to treat me, and they don't go back to the nightmares that they had of sometimes playing for me.
Oh, I have to jump in with the story then real quick. I'm sitting in the intensive care unit, and in walks one of your very favorite players of all time, Mags, to give me my breakfast that I could barely get into my mouth. And I looked at her and I said to her, I was like, did you poison that? And she just gave me the biggest smile ever. We'll share the name of the player afterwards.
Yeah. I think that means that she thought about it with the smile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, kind of brings us into the next part. And I'll lead it off with, how coaching has changed, because of parents, adults, however you want to, word it. So I'll start with just a couple of things that, that we talk about. We have a parent meeting every preseason. And I think I shared the line either last week or the week before about, like, I get how parents think. They want their kid to play with the next four best kids. So now that we've got that figured out, like, how can we make this work so that the team is as successful as they can be? So we talk about a coach, or a triangle, that you have to have a parent, player, coach triangle. And at any time that triangle breaks, there takes twice as long to one, repair it. And one of the things that I see, not just for kids players that I've coached, but see it at other schools, the parent that sits in the front row and is, yelling at their kid what to do, basically coaching them from the stands every single possession, to the point where the kid turns and looks at the parent every time because they're waiting for feedback, instead of looking to the other side where one of us has spent, countless hours at practice with this kid. Usually the parent has no clue what the game plan is, what we want that kid to do. And the coaching from the stands just becomes counterproductive. And, I believe parents, have always, been a supporter of all of our programs. And I think the minority, but it's more and more, not just in our Division IV schools, even though you guys think we're Division II, that the parents have, pushed their way, for lack of a better words, into athletics. And, I believe it was this last season, there were 4 coaches in Division III, in New Hampshire that didn't make it out of the season, as a coach, because of, parents or, maybe truly they made a mistake. But it's so tough to, instruct kids to do one thing and then the parent telling the other, and then the kid's stuck in between, and who do they listen to? And then ultimately, it's detrimental to the success of the team, because you got a kid that's torn, and, they're still growing, their frontal lobe. And so they don't know, who to listen to. And so then they just don't do anything, or they just shut down. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents on how it's changed, with parents. So I'll throw it to either one of you.
I think it's interesting. I never really had to deal with the helicopter parent per se. I would deal with sometimes, quibbling between kids, and parents would come in and say, is my daughter even going to play? And, I would have to discuss with them what was going on and why they maybe were playing out of the position they were playing in. And one of the things that I always did with kids, I didn't really ever have any meetings with parents because I didn't really make any progress there. I would talk to the kids prior to the season, sometimes in the summer scrimmage and time. And I would say, do you want to be treated like girls? Do you want to be treated like girls basketball players? Or do you want to be treated like basketball players? And to a person, pretty much all of them would always say, we want to be treated like basketball players. Okay, then you understand where the communication is coming from. I'm not going to address you as a girl, or I'm not going to address you as a girl basketball player. I'm going to address you as a basketball player. And that's pretty much the communication that we had. I was fortunate in the fact that I never really had to have too many of those meetings. You always have to have some, unfortunately. But I would, I guess, move on and say, I don't envy coaches now dealing with the COVID era, the information era as it growing more and more. To me, anybody who's still coaching and they're successful, able to run a program the way they want to run it, they deserve a lot of credit there.
Yeah. Mags said something about a triangle and the parent communication. I think that's the huge difference between old school and new school. My classic response to every parent who bothered to have a communication with me, mostly because I tried to never have it, was, have you talked to your kid? And most of the time that answer is truly no, they haven't. My belief in the triangle that Mags was talking about is a flat line. It's me to the player to the parent, and in no way does the parent jump over to the coach. They got a problem, talk to their kid. And I love the Wizards' response, because he didn't have a whole lot of those meetings because most of the parents knew he would arrest them and throw them in jail the next day. So that was a huge plus for the Wizard. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the mistakes that Wizard said it perfect. I really respect the coaches that can work through this now, because it's almost an expectation that parents are allowed to communicate with you by text or email, which they would never have the nerve to actually say that to you in person. I just huge amount of respect for you, Mags, for still being able to work through this triangle that I believe should be a flat line.
Yeah, someday I probably will flatline. But I think that's how, maybe I've evolved a little bit, and I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I was,
Wrong
never.
words for you to use, evolution.
I love that. Go ahead.
Yeah, evolution of something. But, not the military style, like the Wizard. But back in the day, that was kind of the same, philosophy that I had, is like, I coach your kid. I tell your kid what I expect of them, and that the communication has to kind of flow downhill. And I don't want to make it sound like, over the years dealt with a lot of parents, because really haven't. Yep. There's always been a bad egg here or there. That usually the meeting has to do with playing time. And, that's one of those non-negotiable topics that schools put in place. And, I think today you're going to see less and less of coaches coaching as long as we coached, because if they don't find the right support system, the adults are going to figure out a way to run them out. And I think, sometimes the parents' philosophy is, I'm going to complain enough so that the coach either decides to quit or, say enough, that they get fired. And, I think, we as the adults have to have the accountability that, we can't just say whatever we want. Like, coaches are human beings most of the time. And I know we elaborated last week about how, we're there for the kids, and it's more than just basketball to us. And sometimes I think, the parents put so much emphasis on winning that they don't allow their kids to fail and learn from adversity. It seems like, more and more today, not necessarily at our school, but just in high school sports in general, as the parents try to solve all the kids' problems instead of allowing them to learn how to figure it out. And then we give rewards for really nothing that we would have praised, 10 years ago. But that's not teaching them that hard work and failure, is part of learning. And the last thing I'll say on the parent part is the blame game. It's so-and-so's fault that, my kid's not playing, or it's so-and-so's fault that they lost the game. And, just not a team mentality that we try to preach, that we win games together, we lose games together. And as long as we learn from the losing and don't make it a habit, then we're better off, not just on the court, but hopefully off the court as well. So that concludes that part. The one follow up that we were going to venture over to is the overprotective society with kids today, and how that's changed coaching. And I kind of just hinted on a couple of things about my opinion of not allowing kids to fail and learning from adversity. So we'll go to the Wizard first.
Well, unfortunately, we have come from a society now where everybody gets the trophy, nobody fails. They don't even keep track in some of these younger sports of scores or anything like that. But then again, you go to a more serious sport like, and I say more serious, but more physical sport like hockey. You have parents fighting in the stands over hockey games, assaulting coaches. Same thing with, Pee Wee football. You always can find videos of that, parents raging on the sideline. Um, Unfortunately, again, it all comes down to the 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 effect that it has when parents are, and we keep throwing parents under the bus, and I don't mean to do that, but parents are a fan of the player, or are they a fan of the team? If you come to a game and you're rooting for um, your player, your child, and you're not rooting for the team, it becomes very obvious to other fans, very quickly. And I guess that develops into some problems. I've seen that in our own sports out of our school. And, the society, again, where we don't let kids fall down so they can get back up. When a kid falls down, this is something that irks the shit out of me. When a kid falls down, everybody always looks and says, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" Let the kid get back up and dust themselves off, so they don't even have to think about crying, because that's the first thing that I think their mind says. Well, I fell down. I'm hurt, and so I've got to have a reaction. Maybe the kid just dusts themselves off, gets back up, and moves on. So I think it all comes from starting at home and how you raise your child. And then when you get to the coaches, how they coach definitely affects what the student is on the field or on the court, and how they act. That's a perfect place for them to fail and still be able to move forward from it.
Yeah, man, we got so many. We always come up with about 300 other things we could discuss, and I know Mag sends us the list of what we might go over in the episode. It feels like a practice plan where you get down to about a third of it and you realize practice is over. So I'll conclude this protective parent concept with something that the Wizard just said. Everything that a kid does on a basketball court is learned behavior. And I think a lot, I tell the story a lot about hiking with my daughter way back when she was 10 years old. We're 2,000 miles into a hike and I'm about ready to quit. And I realized that not once in the entire 5.5 months did my daughter ever tell me she wanted to quit. That's learned behavior. We teach kids to quit. We teach kids to worry about themselves when they fall down. Get back up, dust yourself off like the Wizard said, and get back into the action. And it's when a parent comes running out onto the floor because their kid rolled an ankle that you realize that's why the kid is the baby that they are. Just like let us do our job. And I know we keep shitting on parents and we're going to keep doing it over and over and over again. I can't believe we haven't gotten into officials yet, but we're going to keep shitting on parents. But really, most of them do an amazing job. But it's the ones that don't do an amazing job that turn out shitty kids that don't do a good job for the team. And then we're the ones holding the bag and we look like the idiots.
And we can all look like idiots without any help most of the time.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Absolutely.
I'm an idiot for 40 minutes every morning on Saturday. So
Yeah, well, hey, whatever it takes.
Mouth, insert foot.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of, as the Wizard was saying it, kids fall down and the first response is, "Are you okay?" And just goes to show that we are at times an overprotective society, and we're not necessarily teaching these kids to become resilient adults. We're almost giving them a crutch at times, because they don't learn how to pick themselves up and dust themselves off. They have somebody to do it for them. So the last part of the building the program, and I'm going to throw it to you first, Professor, because you are the one that put this question or this point in the text chat this week, was how has coaching changed because of coaches that abuse the system?
Well, this could be 3 episodes, but there are coaches who abuse their power, and parents have a right to stand up to that. And because of that abuse, we sometimes have parents standing up to things that aren't abuse. And I've said in parent meetings, if there is abuse going on, you need to contact me, but more importantly, to go above my head. But abuse isn't us telling your children to work harder. And the other one is, how do coaches abuse the system on building programs? We've gone over that, and that could be 3 episodes. Recruiting. Stop doing it. If you're these schools that are semi-private that can offer kids a tuition free because of their academics, but they can't pass a class at the school they're at, it's not fair to these small schools. We've all dealt with it. It's disrespectful and it's disgraceful.
Wizard?
that sounds like a tiger that I don't want to poke with a stick right there. But I again, the aspect of alignment has come up a lot with us. We've discussed it a lot. We've discussed teams that are competing at the Division IV level that have the ability to, quote unquote, recruit, and the teams that are lucky to even be able to field a team because of lack of numbers, or they might be the proverbial ski school. And I couldn't agree more. I think there needs to be something done where they sit back and look at all these schools that are in all of the divisions, and rather than letting teams who are going to stink, petition down just because they're not going to be that good, maybe there needs to be some sort of realignment done. Again, that's above my pay grade. So I'm going to agree with Professor and move forward.
To the best that we can on a Saturday morning. I think Professor said it very well about if a coach is abusing, mentally, God forbid, physically, a parent has every right to stand up to that and not. I mean, it should be a fireable offense. That's not what we should be in the business for. And at the same time, not to talk out of both sides of the mouth, but sometimes some honesty that you give a kid is not abuse. It's constructive criticism, and goes back to the previous point that, we don't necessarily as a society do a really good job of allowing kids to fail and learn from failure. That, sometimes the player will go home and say to the parent, the coach yelled at me today. I could probably, have that happen almost every day. Sometimes it's yelling because I know they can do better. Sometimes it's yelling because they made the same mistake multiple times and we've corrected it and they're not correcting it. And sometimes we just yell praise too, like, great job. Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So I think the coaches that demean kids or put them down over and over again, because or pointing the blame at a player because they didn't do something right, and a coach say, well, you cost us the game. Like, no, one play never is the end result. And losing games over the years, and something will happen in the last minute of the game, and the kid feels horrible as it is, but that's not the reason why we lost the game. Yes, it's magnified because of the timing of the game, but you can go back to a possession in the first quarter that ended in a turnover, and you lose a game by one, and you're like, oh, what could have happened with that possession? So I agree that coaches need to be held accountable, but also coaches need to be supported for doing what they feel is best for the children and best for the program. When parents and support systems follow along, that's when you have winning cultures.
I know we have to move along, but I wanted to add to that. I think our theory has always been that we lose the basketball games, the kids win them.
Right.
That is true. That is true. The kids have been undefeated forever.
But I mean that in a good way too, Mags. Like, if we lose a game by a point, that was yours or my fault. That wasn't a kid missing a layup.
Absolutely.
If we win games, it's because the kids did their job.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't have any teaching that went into that, or we didn't develop a game plan. It just happened because of them. Sometimes coaches, myself included, you do lose a close game because of a decision that you made, something you changed as a coach, and you live with that. That's part of, even us as adults learning, is that you make a change and it doesn't work out, and the end result wasn't what you wanted, but okay, you learn from it and you move on. But you also take accountability. Many times I've gone into a locker room and said, that's on me. I'll use the Final Four from this last year as a perfect example. Like, we put a game plan in. The kids executed the game plan perfectly. We didn't shoot the ball very well as a team, but they did exactly what I asked them to do on offense and defense, and we just didn't win the game. So, some of it's execution, but I've always told kids that I'll take the responsibility when the game plan that we put in place didn't work out, and live with that. Because more times than not, being prepared is half the battle, especially the deeper you go in the playoffs. So we're going to turn it over to you, Wizard, for your GOAT debate for this week.
So when we were talking last week, Professor brought up his point guard, greatest of all time, and we remember who it was, right, Max?
Yeah. Oh, we definitely remember that. And, our listeners disappointed there was no feedback from that, conversation. But,
I did get one feedback. Casey Jones is the winningest point guard of all time, not Kuzi.
Oh, we have a correction?
Yep, we did have a correction. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Won 8. I'm not sure he was the starting point guard for all of those, but I do stand corrected.
Okay.
So
sorry about that, Wizard.
Well, so his greatest of all time was, of course, Steph Curry. Do you remember where he went to school, Mags?
Oh, God.
Davidson.
Yes, Davidson. So it made me think of the game that they had, actually the tournament run they had in 2008, where they eventually lost to Kansas, who went on to win it. So I said, well, what is the greatest NCAA Cinderella run that was not successful? I mean, we all know about NC State and the rest of those teams. But so I thought about it, and of course, one of the teams that I thought of was 1990, and I had to go back and look up the years. Now, mind you, but 1990 and Loyola Marymount, and the fact that they would just score outlandish amount of points. One of the teams they beat was a blue blood school that they scored 142 points on. Not sure. I think it might have been Michigan, but so the team I thought of, because they had defeated a 1 seed for sure, I know of, I think a 2 seed as well, way back in 1986, Mags, when you were about 10, I don't know, maybe
eight.
eight.
Who's counting?
In 1986, the LSU Tigers would be my greatest Cinderella of all time that did not win the college tournament.
Oh, that's such a good pick. You almost stole my thunder there. I think they beat a 1, 2, and 3 team, all as the 11 seed.
Wow.
I'm going to go with the one that I thought you were going to steal my thunder there, 1990 Loyola Marymount team. And you were right. They beat Michigan like 149 to 115. But the best part of that is not only did they do something unbelievable, but in their tournament conference, they lost their superstar to a heart issue. And then Bo Kimball would shoot his first free throw of each game in the NCAA tournament left-handed. And man, like, you want to talk about a Cinderella and a tearjerker all at the same time? Oh, what an unbelievable Cinderella team.
That's a good story.
It's a great story, and if our listeners don't know the story, they should go back and find it online. The Hank Gathers story. I was just looking at some of the stats. They averaged 122 points a game.
That's amazing.
A lot of defense. They were one of the ones that went back with the Wizards' view of just pass, shoot, and dribble.
yeah. No need for a shot clock in that era with that team.
I remember listening to the coach, and he used to set a 7-second shot clock in practice.
No.
I love.
Sometimes the first shot you have is the best shot, and if you don't take it, then you're running back because you turned the ball over and you never got a shot. So,
yeah, right. We don't want to pass it too many times. You're going to turn it over.
That's right. Yeah. The idea of a stall today, not that we're going to go off on this topic, but it doesn't exist because the team can't hold the ball long enough.
Nope.
So what's yours, Mags?
Yeah. So I had it down to 2, and obviously you guys picked some really good teams. Yes, I was, a young lad back in the day. Still developing my frontal lobe.
Evolution, man, evolution.
Yeah, evolution. I mean, I don't even know if my frontal lobe is fully developed at this point, but I came down to 2 teams. I came down to the 2010 Butler team, which is where we first heard of Brad Stevens, and as a Celtics fan, glad to have him in the front office making decisions. But they were a 5 seed that year, so it's not so much a Cinderella. But like I can remember watching that, and I'm a Duke fan, and that Duke beat them in the finals that year. But Gordon Hayward's half court heave, I'll still never understand, how that ball didn't go in, where it hit on the backboard and all the, analytics that go into the trajectory of the shot, and like it, in all likelihood, it should have gone in. But along the way, they had, I think it was 3 games that were decided by 4 points or less in their run. So, they just played exciting games, and they played really good defense. But the team I'm going to pick, they didn't make it to the finals, and understood, but, George Mason, in 2006 as an 11 seed. And the reason why I picked them is because they had a tough path. I mean, they had to beat Michigan State, I believe, at one point. They had to beat UNC, and then they had to beat UConn, who was the number 1 overall seed that year, before they lost to the eventual champion Florida in the Final Four. And what to me is remarkable about that team is all 5 starters averaged double figures, but nobody averaged more than 13 points a game. and not one of the players from that George Mason team ever went on to play in the NBA, not even as a role player at the end of the bench. So
that's a shout out to us D4 teams, isn't it? Like, for real.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think that I mean that's where Jim Larinaga came on the scene as a coach before moving on to Miami. So I think that the George Mason team is and even the Butler and the teams that you guys mentioned, that's going to, and we'll talk about this on the next episode about NIL maybe and how it's changed. Like, you're not going to have those smaller schools being able to compete to get the big talent anymore, and so we might not see those deep Cinderella runs. But dang, is March Madness fun to watch still?
Absolutely.
I think it should be. I think the Thursday and Friday when March Madness starts should be a national holiday.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I'm sure you're sitting in your recliner both of those days, Wizard.
I am. If it's not snowing, I am.
That's a true statement. So, all right. Again, to recap, I picked George Mason. Professor, you picked Loyola Marymount, and again, Wizard, your pick
LSU.
LSU. That's correct. Yes. So, all right. Any other words of wisdom, or if we even have such a thing, on this podcast before we sign off for the week?
Don't eat yellow snow.
Oh, that's a good one, Wizard.
Right?
I'll stick with that one too.
Yep.
Yeah.
No snow to eat right now. That's all we can say.
Yeah. Well, last weekend there was, if you went high enough, right? Yeah. Well, that's a perfect way to close out the podcast with that sophisticated wisdom. Wouldn't